I am not a handy person. I don't know how to do many home repairs. Thank God for the internet, because if something does come up, then I am able to research how to do it, find out with a disgusted sigh that it is very complicated, give up and have someone else do it, unless I'm feeling particularly squirrely that day and wanting to try something kind of dangerous. Case in point, when we got our new vehicle and we had to put new license plates on it, I noticed that there was no real way to do that easily. And so we had to buy a specific mounting bracket, which was fine. Only once I tried to put the mounting bracket on, I realized that there are screws that don't seem to fit, and for some reason this isn't working. I know then what has to be done. It involves a power drill, it involves screws, and just kind of screwing the bracket in so you can get it put in there. I think to myself, well, while I don't necessarily have a power drill, this is something easy that I can do. I know that I can do it. I have faith in myself. I trust myself that I can do it. Yet my wife, who is much smarter than I, said, "No, you cannot do it." I did not do it. I wound up taking it, excuse me. I wound up taking it to a dealership, and they did literally the same thing that I was going to do, just with a power drill. And I told my wife about it afterwards. I said, "Honey, I could have absolutely have done that." And she says, "My dear, you are a handsome man. You know so many things, you've read books, and you're a terrific pastor and preacher. You are not handy." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll give it to you. You got me there." But I know I could have done it. I know I could have done it had I had the opportunity, but I understand it's a family vehicle and she wanted it done properly. There are some things that I can do, and some things that I can do well. The other day, I came into the church, and the ceiling was crying. That's literally the best way to describe it. The ceiling was crying tears, and as I saw that, I started crying tears. I start getting on the phone, making phone calls, figuring out where the water is coming from, and I found the offending pipe. And I look at it, and I think, I need to find a tool. Because in my heart of hearts, I truly believe in some way, shape, or form I should have been able to reattach the pipe that had burst off. Couldn't find the right tool. But I know I could have done it. Now, I probably couldn't have. This was probably me just being hopefully optimistic, and what I got for my trouble instead was soaking wet and very cold, but that's neither here nor there. I believed in myself that I could do it. I didn't have an excuse to not do it, because I know what needed to be done, and in that instant I was ready to do what I needed to do had I been able to have the tools to do what was necessary. I didn't fix it, a professional did, so don't worry, because I know that you all are probably thinking, "Oh Lord, it's going to burst again." No, I didn't fix it. Someone who is much smarter and more talented than I was able to fix it. But there are times when I know that I can do things, and even if the odds seem insurmountable, I have this dumb, stupid, young, plucky, optimistic attitude that I can do it. And I think that sometimes that's a good thing to have, especially when we're faced with something big, with something insurmountable. I'm not going to lie. We face something big, we face something that is somewhat insurmountable. But I will say this, everyone who has helped getting things squared away with the flooding has done admirably. Never once was there a moment where we sat down and said, "Oh Lord, woe is me, we didn't rend our clothes, we weren't weeping and gnashing and wailing our teeth." Instead, what we did was we came together and was working on the solution. Because when you're faced with something that needs done, the only option that you have is to keep moving forward. This is how we should approach our lives. This is how we should approach our ministry. There are times when we think we can't do this, we can't do that, and we come up with all of these excuses. And what's fascinating about excuses is it's not something that's new to humanity. It's not something that's new to when God calls people to service. Though the odds seem grim, though the odds are not in your favor, God is with you. If you look at any of the call stories from the prophets, what you will find is a moment where the prophet will say in some way, shape, or form, I cannot do this. It is a hallmark of the call story. For some reason, they think they can't do this. We're not worthy, they say. Or in Moses' case, he comes up with a laundry list of excuses and finally is just honest with God and says, I don't want to do this. Send somebody else. And God's response is always somewhat the same. Tough cookie, you're doing it. I have called you to do this. I have set this task before you. Yes, God says, I understand how hard it is. I understand how unknown the future is. And I understand the trials and the tribulations that you will face. But you do not, he says, go into this alone. God very rarely calls the equipped, but instead he equips the call. Jeremiah is one of the most interesting prophets to read of, mostly because of the jumbled mess of time that his book can become, but also because of the character of Jeremiah, the personality of Jeremiah, especially later. And here in this first chapter, when we read about the call of Jeremiah, we have the Lord coming to a young man, and he says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. What a lovely picture of a sovereign God, is it not? A God who is in control of all things, a God who has some sort of master plan that we get to follow along with. And this God says, look, buddy, when you were in your mother's womb, I knew what you were going to do. I knew the tasks that would be at hand for you. I know the talents that you would need, and I have done my best to equip you to do that which is necessary. God knew from the start of all creation that at one day he would need the services of a young man named Jeremiah. And that he would have to go do things, and that he would have to go through things that are very hard. Jeremiah is thought of in most scholarly works to be suffering from depression. And surely that is the case when you read Jeremiah's book. This is young, plucky, optimistic Jeremiah, though. He should have the sort of stupid confidence that most younger people have, that they can take on the world, they're ready for anything. But he says to God instead, he says, Ah, Lord God, truly I do not know how to speak, for I am only a boy. You see, you would think that the one thing that would give Jeremiah the strength, the courage, the chutzpah to deal with what he has to do, this young, youthful, plucky optimism, it hasn't been beaten out of him yet by the world or by the forces around him. You would think that that would be a help to him. But instead, what he does, because he does not believe in himself, he uses that as an excuse. I'm too young, God. I can't possibly do this. No one will listen to me. No one will hear the words that I say. They will laugh at me. They might hurt me. I cannot do this because of this particular reason. What's fascinating here is that his excuse comes after God has already said, I know all about you. I know who you are. I know what your talents are. I know exactly what it is you can do, and I need you, friend, to do this. After God says this, Jeremiah still thinks he has some wiggle room, that maybe he can get out of this, or something along the lines. He's coming up with an excuse. I mean, we come up with excuses all the time, don't we? I've never met a parent who has not come up with an excuse. The one thing that always bugged me about my parents growing up was how we did bedtime. And I understand it now as a parent, because bedtime is the time when the child goes to bed. You have 5 minutes to breathe with your spouse, and you can relax. I get that. Even though there's still other things that need to be done, you can kind of relax. I can remember having a set time, and on Sunday evenings we would always have to go to bed even earlier, and the excuse was, well, you need to have more sleep. You have school tomorrow. You have a chance to get more sleep and to be better rested for the day. And I did not like that reasoning at all. I do now, though. I totally get what they were really trying to say. And I would kick and fuss and fight and scream, "Mom, the sun is still out. My bed is right by the window. I can't possibly sleep in these conditions. It's too hot. It's too cold." All of these things. I can remember one time, the one excuse that I had for not wanting to go to sleep. And this is true. This is a terrifying true story. I go into my parents' room, and I say, "Dad, I can't sleep." And he kind of rouses from a slumber. He's like, "What? I can't sleep. I think that if I watched some TV, I would be able to fall asleep." He gives out this loud, dejected sigh, and he says, "All right." Takes me downstairs, turns on the TV, and there is nothing good on at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting there watching the news, and he says, "Good night." Goes back upstairs to bed. I got my way. I was watching TV for all of 5 seconds. I turned it off, went back upstairs, and crawled in bed and went to sleep. But it was just an excuse, because I wanted to be up. I wanted to watch TV. And we have excuses that aren't even just like that. We have excuses that explain away why we can't do things. I'm too tired. I'm too this. I'm too that. I'm too young. I'm too old. We have all of these excuses saying we can't do something. And sometimes they're valid excuses. Sometimes they're very valid. For example, I would never try to change the brakes on my cars. I don't know how to do that. My lessons in growing up with my dad, I got what I like to call the stereotypical dad lessons in growing up, which was stand here and hold the flashlight. That's the summation of all of my work on cars, on pipes, on things like that. Stand here and hold the flashlight. Now, as I got older, my dad tried to do some things, but at that point I was more interested in girls and fishing and doing all these other things. At one point, we're trying to put more antifreeze in a car because he had just changed out the little radiator cap. And he says, "All right, hand me the antifreeze." I said, "Which one's the antifreeze?" Because there was windshield washer fluid and antifreeze there. He said, "Hand me the antifreeze." I said, "Is that the orange one?" He said, "No, I didn't say the orange one. I said the antifreeze." And I grab it, I'm like, "Well, it's orange." But in his mind, I didn't have an excuse to not do it. I should have known what I was supposed to do. And now, as I'm older, I don't have as many excuses as I used to have. That when the chips are down, when something goes on, I have to react. I have to be able to do something. I have to be able to look at a problem and solve the problem and do what is necessary regardless of how I feel or what I would rather be doing. My kids are wonderful, but they think I stay up all night playing video games and watching TV. They think I lead some sort of exciting life once they go to bed. I watch a little bit of TV with my wife, and then I pass out in bed. Not the exciting thing that they think. But now they want to be up. They want to do this. They want to do that. And so they come up with their excuses. And we've told them several times. We tell them all the time, if you don't go to bed, you're going to be tired in the next morning. What is so great is when you talk to a child who has been up all night playing video games. It's absolutely wonderful. Well, I just want to take a nap. Well, you can't because now you have work to do. That's not a valid excuse. See, we told you what was going to happen. You chose not to listen. That's fine. That's dandy. But now you have to deal with the consequences. And there's no excuse to not do your chores, to not do your schoolwork, to not do these things. And wouldn't you know it, wonder of wonders, miracle of miracles, they find the strength and the energy to continue on about their day. God knows exactly who we are. God knows exactly what it is we can do. And God would not call us to a particular ministry. God would not give us a particular set of circumstances unless God knew that we were going to be able to use it in some way, shape, or form to bring glory to God. After Jeremiah tries to get out of it, I can't do this, I'm a boy, God says, hold up. Don't say I am only a boy, for you shall go to all whom I send you, and you shall speak whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am going with you to deliver you. Every prophet who tries to get out of their call is told the same thing. You are going, and I am going with you. At what point does the excuse start to become invalid? Think of it this way. Jeremiah, a young boy, should be plucky, should be optimistic. Says he doesn't want to do something. He's afraid of doing it. For some reason, there is a fear, there is an anxiety there that he does not want to fully participate in what he does. He cannot do it, he says. He's too young. He doesn't know enough. And God says, no. Because while you think you don't know enough, that's fine, but I am going with you. Says the same thing to Moses. Says the same thing to Isaiah. All of the prophets get told the same thing. You are not going by yourself. You are not going to rest in your own power. You will rest in my power. And you will do what I need you to do, not through your own strength, but through the strength that I am giving you. The Lord God touches Jeremiah's lips, puts his words in his mouth, and says, see, today I appoint you over nations and over kingdoms to pluck up and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. At this point, Jeremiah should be fine. Not because he believes in himself, but he believes in the God who believes in him. And that's what we have to do. Every time we say we can't do something, we can't do this, we can't do that, we are absolutely right. We know that we can't. You have set up a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're setting yourself up for defeat in that moment. There are times when we genuinely can't do something, and that's fine. But there are times when we come up with excuses as to why we can't do something. In my youth and my exuberance, I thought for sure I would be able to fix the pipe myself. And I couldn't. I had no idea how to shut off the water. I couldn't do it. And so I get on the horn and I talk to people who can help. Because there is always another solution. There is always another way to do things. We say we can't do these things, and we're right, we can't. But we know that we can get it done because of something that we need to do. I know that I'm not the greatest cook in my house. I know that my wife is the best cook in the house. And yet when she is sick, when she is not home, it falls upon me to cook. And children cannot live on chicken nuggets and French fries alone. Especially when you have a wife who says, make sure you include a vegetable. And my go-to response is, well, potatoes are a vegetable and those are in French fries. Really, I'm just being lazy and I don't want to cook. But I do. Even though I'm not good at it, I do what is necessary, and we do the same. You see, God has called us to do things. He has called us into ministry. He has called us to proclaim his name in word and in deed, knowing that we don't believe in ourselves, and we shouldn't believe in ourselves. We should believe in the God who believes in us, the creator, the ruler, the ordainer, and the sustainer of all things. That is who we put our trust in. That is who we put our faith in. And this God, this one who has numbered the stars, who knows how many hairs are on our head, who knows everything about anything, believes in us. Sometimes the odds are not in our favor. Sometimes the task at hand is too much to bear. Sometimes the future is too unknown. But we know who's at the end of all things. We know that God is there and that God has ordained all things. God hasn't given us more than we can handle to be cruel, but to show us God's power. Thanks be to the God who loves us, who guides us, and strengthens us through all things. Amen.